Hi, everyone. This is Ben with Ben's Election Predictions, and we are going to dive into just the general state of the 2024 GOP primary. Um, if you've been tuning in at all, I think what the message that we're hearing is that Trump is going to run away with it. He's clearly up in the polls. He's breaking 50, even 60% in some of the national polls. And in many of the betting markets, Trump has actually better odds of being the Republican nominee than Biden does being the Democratic nominee, even though Joe Biden is the incumbent Democratic president. And there's no serious challengers really on the Democratic side for the primary, if they even hold the primary votes. So why is this? That's one question that I want to answer here. And also, like, is it even worth kind of covering the 2024 GOP primary if Trump's going to run away with it so much? I'm going to answer both those questions because while I do think Trump has a lead that is kind of unprecedented, and he's in a very unique situation as a quasi incumbent GOP presidential candidate. Still, I think that this primary is worth covering because I think it's closer than maybe some pundits have said it is. People have written off all these other candidates and kind of said, Trump's definitely going to be the nominee, and I'm going to tell you why I think that they're wrong. So starting out, I want to kind of look at, people talk about the polls, people talk about the states and the delegates, and is it winner take all, or is it kind of more segmented? This is the current forecast on Race to the White House, which I think is a fantastic tool for covering the primaries, and you can see that Trump is the clear leader. You need 1,235 delegates to win. And, Trump is beyond that by a great amount. And none of the other candidates even break 100. However, you also don't need all these candidates to win. All you need is a plurality. And as we saw in the 2016 primary, Trump didn't even get a majority of the vote, but he got a plurality of the vote, but he got a majority of the delegates. And so, okay, let me actually rephrase this. You actually do need to get a majority of the delegates, or it is a contested convention, but it's likely that the candidate who wins it all actually doesn't get a majority of the vote, but simply gets a plurality. So going back to this model, if we look at this, as a static point in time, we can say that there's probably no chance that any of these other candidates have a respectable challenge to Trump. It looks like Trump is going to win it all. And if we look at the delegate count over time, we can see at one point that it actually was pretty close. I mean, Trump is always slightly held above the number that he needed to win, but it is very hard to build these national models because there's so much of the primary is due to momentum, and they're based on the results of past states, and things can change very, very quickly. Because like I know in 2016, people were talking about this Marco Rubio momentum that was all but stopped when he had his debate performance where people thought he was kind of like a robot, and people said that Chris Christie kind of ended his career, and that had a major impact. Or someone like Joe Biden, people thought he was dead in the water. In the betting markets, he was in the low single digits, like 10 or 12% chance to win. He ended up winning by having a resounding victory in South Carolina that built that momentum, and he got the endorsements there. So first, I do want to say the bull case for Trump. I mean, he's up. He's at over 50% in the national polls. This is an average of the polls, and Trump support has grown in the GOP primary from the beginning of the year when DeSantis was much closer to him. And it's kind of hard to see these folks at the bottom. Recently, Nikki Haley has had a mini surge, but still not over an average of 10%. DeSantis is probably still the most credible challenger. And there's obviously been a lot of movement in the bottom parts, like Vivek Ramaswamy kind of came out of nowhere, but has done pretty well for himself. But none of this really matters if Trump is above 50%. I mean, Trump in 2016 got 45% with a similarly crowded field and won it all. And so we can see some of these polls, in some of these polls, Trump is polling as high as 59, 56, and these are head-to-head polls, so they're going to have Trump higher, but even breaking 60 in some of these polls that do include everyone. So for the other candidates, if you want any chance to win, you're going to have to get Trump below 50% nationally. And one kind of other point I want to make on the bull case for Trump, coming out of the 2022 midterms when Trump did so poorly, I think a lot of people in the GOP establishment, the big money donors who, they might have voted for Trump, but they weren't particularly friendly with Trump. And after losing in 2018, 2020, and 2022, they thought, this was the time that we're going to turn over a new leaf and vote in an alternative to Trump. However, they've tried that. Millions of dollars have been poured into the campaigns, and for the longest time it was Ron DeSantis. Then there was a lot of money behind Tim Scott, and now it seems like that all the money is going to Nikki Haley. So it is interesting to see that some of these people have given up. One of Ron DeSantis' main kind of hedge fund donors has stopped giving him money, and I'll talk about later how maybe the bear case that Trump has locked up. But I mean, I do want to be honest. He is like 50 points ahead. He has been getting the most money, and like the field is still very fragmented, so it is hard to kind of Ken Griffin was the main one who sought donate to DeSantis, so it is going to be harder for him. However, on the other hand, I do think there is going to be, as we get closer to election day, which is going to be January 15th, is the first state, Iowa, which I think will be the most important. There still is a lot of time, and there's still so much money. And I think there's some GOP donors still in those smoke-filled rooms that are kind of pulling the levers, and they feel totally blindsided after 2016. And they're saying we aren't going to have this happen again. And I think as Trump has been much more resilient than people thought, clearly, because some have given up, but I don't think it's over there. So what is the path to that? And am I just saying this because, I'm biased because I'm anti-Trump or something, or blah, blah, blah. So let me put some meat behind the bone. So first of all, in 2016, obviously it was a much different time. Trump was not an incumbent. He was the outsider. Trump did not fully run away with the primary, like maybe people kind of think in their mind. They're like, oh, he smashed Jeb Bush, or like, oh, like he won it in a landslide. Trump didn't win in a landslide. And you see one of the states that Trump lost was Iowa. Ted Cruz won Iowa. He won Wisconsin. And Trump only got 44% of the vote. And so this is to say, I mean, even when you have a figure like Trump that sucks the oxygen out of the room, and his rallies are so huge, and none of the other candidates kind of rallies as close to that, there still are large swaths of the Republican Party that came out to vote specifically against Trump and for other candidates. Are some of these Ted Cruz, Marco Rubio, and John Kasich voters from 2016 going to vote for Trump in the primary? Well, definitely. And, things have changed. And I mean, that's why Trump is at, 50, 60% now, when in 2016, he was only, at 44%. Let's move on, though, to some of the other articles that I have here. So I thought this was pretty interesting because we've been talking about Iowa for a while. But this really goes into depth on Ron DeSantis' ground game in Iowa, which I think will be one of the main stumbling blocks for Trump if he does lose. I don't necessarily think that Ron DeSantis is going to win in Iowa, but I think that this is where Trump is showing some vulnerability. I mean, DeSantis still trails, Trump by, between maybe like 30 and 40 points in Iowa, which is less so than what it is nationally. But like people like DeSantis, Tim Scott, Nikki Haley, they're putting all of their cards into Iowa. And to a certain extent, some of their tactics have been working. Trump is under 50% in Iowa. And the ground game matters more. The grassroots matters more in a state like Iowa, where it's the caucus rather than the primary. And, Trump hasn't been to Iowa as much as some of these other candidates. I mean, Vivek Ramaswamy practically lives in Iowa. Trump has been there, 50 times, I think. Or DeSantis has been there 50 times. And I think one thing that's huge is, DeSantis has been to, all 98 counties, and he's going to go to all 99. And he's really knocking on these doors, getting people to sign the DeSantis pledge, which means that you're going to vote for DeSantis in the primary. And Trump, while he did get the endorsement of the attorney general in Iowa, he doesn't have as much grassroots support in Iowa than he does in some of these other states. So like when Trump came to Iowa for the Iowa State Fair, he flew in congressmen from Florida as kind of like a troll to DeSantis. And, these were the Florida congressmen that had endorsed Trump. But, DeSantis does have more of the state legislator endorsements. And I think that it's going to be closer in Iowa than people think. And there was one quote in here that I'm trying to find, but it basically says that, people only start paying attention 6 to 8 weeks beforehand. And that is very true. Yeah. So most caucus goers, don't make up their mind, and we still haven't gotten there. And I've showed this in past videos, but this is basically, showing that, while Trump leads nationally in the early voting states, there is some vulnerability here. And I think, that is the reason why the betting markets have Trump at 71% rather than what I think the real price should be. If the polling holds up, he should be at 100%. And you can see that, in Iowa and in New Hampshire, Trump's numbers are more like at 84, 85%. And I think that that's because they're closer. But I also think that people realize that, there's still a lot of time left and a lot of things can happen. So one thing I wanted to focus on is the indictments against Trump. I mean, I don't think it'll stop him from running. Obviously, I think it's unconstitutional to bar him from the ballot, as far as I read. So, I don't support, what could be interpreted as election interference by some of these DAs and attorney generals. However, it is going to have an impact, and so far it's helped him. But I don't necessarily think it's just going to throw more uncertainty into the race. And the last thing that I wanted to cover is this article in the New York Times. So, like I said before about these big donor groups that are trying to, stop Trump from being the nominee for the GOP, Americans for Prosperity and Club for Growth. So, this is one example of they're running a focus group in Iowa. Trying to test some ads and see what worked. And the overall headline is that, a lot of these voters, very loyal to Trump, and it's hard to get them to, change their mind. However, I do think this article headline is a little bit deceiving here. So they said, with over 40 ads and $6 million spent, it seems like, they're trying very, very hard. And the headline's basically saying it's not working. However, when we go into the meat of the article towards the end here, we see that in Iowa, where the ads ran, Mr. Trump's likely share of Republican vote fell by 4 percentage points. And in the areas where that he did not advertise, Mr. Trump's support grew by 5 percentage points. So that's a difference of nine percentage points. And, while you think that might not matter that much at first, I think, as we get 6 to 8 weeks closer to the election, I think the impact of, certain targeted ads will have a bigger impact than they have been. Trump has universal name ID, especially among GOP primary voters. All the other candidates don't. Even a very prominent person in the Republican Party like Ron DeSantis does not have universal name ID. As he starts, knocking on all these doors, and as they kind of hone in on their message more, because as you see, some of these ads did not work. When you criticize Trump on COVID, it says that people, actually, when they hear those criticisms, they actually rally around Trump more, and it makes his support increase. So if the candidates are currently running ads with this message right now, it's actually totally backfiring on them. So I think as these campaigns learn and become smarter and realize that the message that they have will work a little bit better, and that is a message of kind of the electability message. I think you're going to see that translate into some of these other candidates maybe eroding into Trump's advantage in the early states, and especially Iowa, a state that Trump lost in 2016. And the last thing that I do want to say is that with the electability message, I understand that is not very effective when you have polls showing that, Trump performs the best against Biden, better than DeSantis and Haley. I really do think that these polls are just a snapshot in time. Biden is very unpopular. He's very, with inflation rising, he's not in a very strong position. However, election polls over 1 year out, I really don't think you can rely on these. And I think these polls are mainly testing out name ID rather than who you would actually vote for. I don't actually purely know, maybe I'll do a video on this later, who would be more electable, Trump or DeSantis. My initial thought would be DeSantis, but Trump did have that unique appeal in the Rust Belt. I absolutely do think that Nikki Haley would be more electable. I do think she could win over some of those more modern candidates, maybe the moms in the suburbs that were lost. So I do think if the candidates in the campaigns can, hammer home this message of, Trump is a loser, he's weak, he's getting older, he's not as strong as he once was, I think that's clearly shown to be a more effective message than, criticizing Trump on the policies, because, people or Republican voters, remember the Trump years quite fondly, when the economy was doing well. So anyway, to sum that up, that is why we are here. I do think that these numbers on the delegate counts will change, and that that's why I'm getting back into the YouTube game. I want to cover it state by state, poll by poll, and I want to be ahead of everyone else and smarter than the pundit. So if you like this video, give it a thumbs up, hit the subscribe button, and drop some comments, and let me know if you agree, disagree. I think I'm doing things